In the distant valley of Fjellbrekka, Iceland, where freezing winds whisper ancient secrets and mountains rise like guardians of old tragedies, Jonas travels alone in his van converted into a mobile office. He's contracted to record icy landscapes at the request of a digital travel magazine, but his real motivation is different: documenting strange reports about nighttime disappearances on the road. The van covers miles of desolate terrain. Between volcanic rocks and snowy fields, little can be seen beyond the asphalt and orange wind reflecting on the hood. The GPS suddenly recalculates the route, not by accident, but by something invisible that drives him through an undocumented shortcut. This new path leads Jonas down a secondary trail, a narrow road carved into slippery cliffs, where only the warm light of headlights illuminates the way, and the silence is deep, almost tangible. It's after midnight when Jonas spots an ancient passage, a mysterious tunnel carved into black rock, unnamed, without signs. The entrance is an arch broken by nature and abandonment, with aged lights flickering irregularly. An icy current flows from the tunnel, and Jonas rolls down the window to feel the humid air, mixing with the smell of wet stone and a faint metallic perfume, almost imperceptible. The radio, which moments before played an Icelandic folk melody, falters, crackling until falling into static silence. He stops the car a few meters before the entrance, hesitates, but decides to advance, as if something pushed him forward. Curiosity and an almost sickly urgency drive him inside. The tires acquire a hollow tone rolling over concrete, and the van's interior freezes as if heat were being sucked by the tunnel. Jonas drives concentrated. Lights flicker on the low ceiling and windows reflect long shadows, stretching his face into distorted images. The soundtrack changes. A distant whistle echoes, nothing human, as if recalling an ancestral song. It's then that he sees, to his right, an immobile figure leaning against the wall, as if it were part of the tunnel itself. Arched back, broad shoulders, thin hair, and a heavy, soaked overcoat. No visible face, no headlights, just there, paradoxically static in a place where nothing should remain still. Jonas holds his breath. The figure turns slowly. The gaze that emerges from the darkness, lifeless, pierces the soul. It's a face deformed by time, hunger, and treacherous anguish. Indefinable age, could be 80, 100 years old. It's an ancient, ancestral presence. The hand rises in a slow, unsubtle gesture, an invitation or a warning. Jonas feels a low pulsation echo in his ears. His pulse accelerates, palms grip, the steering wheel white with sweat. He reduces speed even more and, without pretense, brakes. The van stops centimeters from the figure. Jonas smells something metallic, more intense now, mixed with something organic, almost like exposed flesh. A buzzing like inhuman wind runs through the tunnel, strange, disturbing. The figure remains. Jonas opens the window. The door stays closed. He tries to keep his voice steady. Is everything okay? Do you need help? The figure doesn't respond. Silence extends like a dark blessing. There should be human warmth, a cry for help, but there's nothing. Just this figure, standing in the frozen tunnel. Jonas holds his breath, steps on the yaw. Accelerator slowly but firmly. He feels that moving away would be best. However, something holds him, a perverse magnetism that keeps him there, stopped in front of the unknown. A second later, the figure disappears, like a mirage liquefied by cold air. Jonas blinks. The tunnel is empty. The radio remains silent, strange. He accelerates again, wanting to exit as quickly as possible, but a sensation of torment crushes his chest. Fear wasn't just reaction, it was warning. He drives, the tunnel seems endless. The exit remains distant, even with the speedometer fixed at 70 km/h, the lane's limit that now makes little sense. The lights above begin to go out in slow sequence, and darkness advances through entire sections, consuming the traveled path. The van trembles, the engine resonates like a lament. Jonas feels his thoughts being drained, his attention obscured by the advancing void. Darkness has pulsation, it breathes. Anxiety spikes, but he doesn't break. He knows the only chance is to continue. He thinks about giving up, reducing speed, stopping there and waiting for death. But a raw instinct activates. No, you're not going to die here. His knees ache with tension, fingers wrap around the steering wheel until it creaks. He refuses darkness's invitation. The tunnel shudders, metallic, alive, deep. A thin voice whispers, "She's coming, and you're going to rest." Jonas chokes. A faint light ahead expands in quick flashes. He tightens his seatbelt, licks, dry lips. Inside, the thunderous silence. Outside, the world seems solid, unbeatable. The van reaches the exit. Headlights explode in white light. The cold sky, freshly painted by Arctic aurora. The valley emerges again, strange contrasts of red and blue. He stops right at the tunnel's edge, breathless, eyes dilated, hands trembling. Without saying a word, the morning cold envelops him, but it's good. Less oppressive than the tunnel. He remains there, motionless, until, in a misshapen impulse, he resumes his march and disappears down the road, without looking back. It took him hours to reach the first village, just to drink a sip of warm milk and note every detail. The ancestral figure, the smell of blood, the whispering voice. He knew he couldn't trust anyone. He would tell the story only when he was safe. And for the first time in his profession, he chose to edit his photos, cut the audio, and keep only the account. He promised himself he would never return to that tunnel. But deep in his soul, he felt that somehow the tunnel had never let him go. He whispers to the icy wind outside, "You let me go today, but we'll see each other again." 9,600 kilometers away in the remote province of Luang Namtha, Laos, a young woman named Makala, 27 years old, was moving to a village forgotten by civilization, with a name almost unpronounceable to foreigners, Nong Phui. She had been assigned to act as an alternative education coordinator in a village where there wasn't even electric light, though this wasn't her real reason. Makala always had disturbing dreams about a giant tree, full of open eyes among the branches, and a child calling for help. Her grandmother, before dying, said this call wasn't symbolic, it was real, and that the blood of her family's ancient lineage was connected to this forgotten forest where Nong Phui rested like a living island surrounded by constant mist. Arriving at the village, Makala was received with opaque, shy, almost embarrassed looks. Children didn't smile, adults avoided eye contact, and everyone seemed to speak quietly, as if the very sound of voice could wake something sleeping in the trees. There was one rule clearly stated by the local elder, a man with skin wrinkled like old paper. Never go to the tall tree to the north, never look into its eyes, never listen to what it says. Makala smiled respectfully, but deep down didn't understand. She hadn't yet seen this tree, and thought it was just a symbol of tribal folklore. On the third night, insomnia conquered fatigue. Makala, already adapted to the hot climate and nights without electricity, walked alone with an oil lamp through the silent village. Mist rose slowly as if sprouting from the ground, and it was then she saw a trail of white cloths tied to low branches like silent offerings led to the forest's heart. There, for the first time, she saw the tree. It was colossal, enormous, misshapen. The trunk seemed to pulse. Twisted branches rose like dancing arms, and between the barks, eyes, dozens, maybe hundreds, and they all opened at the same time. She heard a voice, low, sibilant, neither masculine nor feminine. "You saw me. Now I can see you too." Makala fell to her knees. Her hands trembled. Oil from the lamp spilled over her fingers. The flame went out in a whisper. From the darkness, something began to emerge. A childlike figure with deformed features, eyes black as ash and dark skin, covered with roots and dead leaves. The child had no mouth. And yet, it whispered, "Everything is inside you now." She woke up in her bed, drenched in sweat. Clothes covered in mud, hair with dry leaves between strands. She didn't remember returning. The next day, she was informed, that a village child had disappeared, the fifth case that year. The village closed in silent panic. She tried to ask, but no one wanted to talk anymore. The elder's house was locked, and worse, she could no longer remember the face of the child she'd seen the night before. It was as if the memory had been erased on purpose. In the following days, things began to happen. Sounds of feet running over the roof at night, whispers coming from inside the closet, and the house's mirror, a relic from the previous mission, showed something behind her whenever she looked at herself. The mouthless child, each time closer, each time clearer. She covered the mirror with a cloth, but the whispers didn't cease. Then, on the sixth night, reality broke the barriers of logic. She woke to the sound of heavy knocking on the door. She opened it, and there was no one. But in front of the house, there were footprints, small, barefoot, going toward the tree trail. Makala understood. This was an invitation, or a charge. She lit the lamp and went. The trail was darker than before. The white cloths were stained with dried blood, and the tree's eyes were already open before she even arrived. The child waited at the trunk's base. "You brought me another one," it whispered without a mouth. And Makala, terrified, saw behind her another small body, one of the village children, paralyzed, eyes white. The tree opened in a putrid gap and branches grabbed the child. Makala ran, but already knew. She was part of it now. Something had entered her. The tree had marked her. And every time she looked in a mirror, a new eye formed on her skin. Today, she lives reclusive in the hills of a neighboring country, far from the village. But sometimes, when silence falls, she hears knocking on her door and knows the tree still sees her and still collects. In Warsaw, Poland, during the brutal winter of 2002, a brutalist-style apartment building caught attention not for its ugly architecture, but for the rumors surrounding it since the 70s. Block 56, as it was known among residents, had been built over the rubble of an underground prison from World War II. Officially, this was ignored by authorities, but the elderly said the basements still maintained part of the old structure, with cells, torture marks on walls, and something even deeper, sealed chambers where no one should ever enter. Mariusz, a 41-year-old man, former hospital maintenance worker, moved to the 8th floor after a traumatic divorce. He sought solitude, but what he found was far beyond that. In the first days, the apartment seemed calm, though excessively cold, even with the heater on. He noticed that the wall clock, always at midnight, stopped for 3 minutes and returned to work alone. At first, he thought it was a defect, but it was always the same time, always exactly 3 minutes, without explanation. In the second week, he began to hear sounds from the plumbing, knocking, scratching, and at times muffled screams, as if someone were submerged and still trying to call for help. He called a technician, who laughed and said the building was known for having old plumbing that made strange noises. Mariusz accepted the answer, but with discomfort. One night after falling asleep on the sofa, he woke with the TV turning off by itself and the clear sound of footsteps coming from the building's corridor. Opening the door, he saw a man in a very old suit, pale skin, unshaven beard, and sunken eyes. He said nothing, just walked, slowly, with hands crossed behind his back. When Mariusz called, the man stopped, turned, and simply disappeared in the air as if made of dust. The next morning, an elderly neighbor named Sabina approached him with tired eyes and asked if he had received the visit. When he confirmed, she just shook her head and said, "That means he's already chosen you. It doesn't take long after that," and went back inside without giving more details. From then on, manifestations increased. All mirrors in the apartment began to fog up as if there were constant vapor, even without hot showers or any heat source. One day, he clearly heard a moan coming from the bedroom closet. Opening it, he found a piece of bloodied women's clothing. He had never brought anyone there. And the most bizarre, when he went to throw it away, the cloth disappeared from his hand before reaching the trash. He researched the building, found on deep web forums an old topic, written in archaic Polish, that mentioned the Guardian of the 3 Minutes, an entity that manifested in places of extreme suffering and that chose a person to carry with them others' memories. These chosen ones lived with fragments of lives that weren't theirs. They saw tortures, felt deaths, dreamed of pains they never lived. In the following weeks, Mariusz had visions. He saw himself in narrow tunnels, trapped among corpses, hearing children's voices begging to get out. He felt hunger, cold, smell of blood, and the constant sensation that someone touched his neck even when alone. Until one night, at midnight, the clock stopped, but didn't return. During the 3 minutes of pause, all apartment lights went out. The heater turned off. Silence was total. And then, he heard the voice. A voice coming from inside his own head. "You want it to stop? Then take someone's place." He woke up inside, the building's basement, naked, body dirty, tied by old chains. Around him, symbols carved on walls, all drawn with human nails, as if decades of trapped people had written that. He saw others there, some in pieces, others motionless but still alive, breathing slowly. He tried to scream, but nothing came out. The door was locked. And for 3 long minutes, something walked around him, murmuring words in Old German. At the end of time, Mariusz woke again on the sofa, but he was no longer himself. He looked in the mirror and for a second saw the suited man's face. Only for a second, but understood everything. Today, apartment 803 is empty, but the clock still stops for 3 minutes, and neighbors swear they hear knocking from the plumbing, as if someone on the other side asked for help, a request no one hears anymore, or prefers to pretend they don't. In the interior of Romania, in a village forgotten by dirt roads, lived Elena, a woman in her 50s, who dedicated her life to beekeeping. Different from the soft images we usually have of hives, she cultivated her bees in an isolated area near a dense forest that local residents avoided. They said the forest was cursed, and Elena knew it. In fact, she felt the curse running through that land's roots. Elena began to notice something strange when her bees, usually peaceful, began to behave aggressively. Not only that, but her hives began to be invaded by a species she'd never seen before. Black insects with red eyes and transparent wings that made a sound like distant whispers. Every time these insects landed on nearby flowers, plants withered within minutes. On a moonless night, after a violent storm, Elena felt an unusual weight in her chest. The bees fled the hives, leaving only the black insects. She heard a noise. Coming from the forest, something that sounded like dragging chains mixed with low moans, which grew until they became desperate screams. Elena knew she needed to go there, even with fear. Something in her blood said the evil wasn't just in the bees. Entering the forest, darkness seemed alive. Trees seemed to close behind her, preventing exit. She felt invisible hands touching her shoulders, whispering promises of pain. The ground, covered by wet leaves, began to bleed. Elena tried to run but tripped over something. A skeleton, semi-buried, still holding a burned wooden cross. It was the first victim of what lived there. That night marked the beginning of a macabre cycle. Elena began to dream of hooded figures, sacrificing people to an ancestral being known only as the Guardian of Black Honey. In dreams, she saw the Guardian's face, a man with cracked skin, like tree bark, empty eyes, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. He spoke little, but his presence imposed a fear that froze even the soul. Deaths began happening in the village. People disappeared without leaving traces, and when bodies were found, they were mutilated, with sting marks on their backs and black honey dripping from wounds. No doctor could explain the origin of the sticky substance. Authorities turned a blind eye, saying they were attacks by wild animals, but residents knew the truth. Evil was among them. Elena, taken by a mixture of guilt and determination, decided she needed to face the Guardian. On a starless night, she returned to the forest, armed with a torch, an old dagger, and a jar of pure honey, a gift from her grandmother. She knew honey was the only thing that could weaken the creature, as it was the opposite of the black honey the entity produced. In the forest's heart, Elena found an altar made of bones and honey. The Guardian was there, waiting, wrapped in shadows that seemed to feed on the torch's light. The battle that followed was brutal. Elena tried to use honey to burn the creature, but it regenerated too quickly, as if it had roots feeding from the cursed earth itself. In a moment of desperation, Elena drove the dagger into the guardian's chest, feeling a cold energy spread through her body. The being screamed, a sound that seemed to echo through centuries, until everything fell silent. Elena fell to the ground, exhausted, and saw the guardian crumble into a cloud of black dust. When she returned to the village, she found everything different. The bees were calm, flowers bloomed again, and honey was sweet once more. But she knew the curse never really disappears. It just sleeps, waiting for the next breach to return. In the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, in the United States, there exists a small town called Millfield, known for its old coal mines, now abandoned. It was there that the most disturbing account on record happened, told by Daniel, a geologist in his 30s, who, during an expedition to map the mines, encountered something that changed his life forever. From the beginning, Daniel noticed a strange presence. The mist covering the mine entrance seemed to move with its own will, forming figures that disappeared when he tried to focus on them. Equipped with thermal cameras and sensors, he managed to record temperature variations that had no natural explanation, freezing points as if the air itself were sick. Going deeper, he found ancient inscriptions on walls, symbols that seemed a mixture of runes and drawings of unknown creatures. As he advanced, sounds began to echo, footsteps that corresponded to no one, low laughter and muffled cries. His radio failed. Communication with the surface became intermittent, and a growing sensation of being watched took hold of him. It was on what would be the third day of the expedition that Daniel first saw the entity. It was a humanoid figure with transparent skin, where one could see what seemed to be a heart pulsing slowly, but in blue flames. Its eyes were black abysses, as if they sucked light. When the creature approached, Daniel felt a piercing pain in his chest, as if his veins were being consumed from within. He ran, but exits seemed to close. Passages that were previously open were blocked by stones that weren't there before. Daniel realized the mines were a living labyrinth, capable of transforming to imprison those who shouldn't leave. In desperation, he tried to use a special tool he carried, a device that emitted ultrasonic sound waves designed to scare away dangerous animals. To his surprise, the creature recoiled, making a guttural sound that reverberated through the mine walls. Daniel took advantage to flee, but not before hearing a last whisper, "You shouldn't be here." When he finally returned to the surface, he was exhausted, with strange marks on his body and a lost look. His equipment, however, brought images no one could explain. Shadows moving without source, voices in frequencies inaudible to human ears, in the mind map indicating caverns that not even official maps knew. In the following months, Daniel tried to alert authorities and residents, but was discredited. The mine was sealed, and the town tried to forget what happened. But those who know the story know those tunnels still guard secrets, and that something waits down there, something that doesn't want to be discovered. What Daniel didn't tell anyone was that, since then, he feels a presence following him. At night, shadows pass through his bedroom wall, and voices call his name. He knows the creature came back with him, and that his struggle is far from over. These stories you're hearing here, they're not just a scare, they're a reminder. The supernatural doesn't respect country, belief, or logic. It just needs a breach, a portal, a wounded heart. If you felt something strange during this video, an itch behind your ear, a sensation that someone was watching you, a thought that wasn't your own, comment. But with honesty. No emojis or cool. Tell us if you've ever seen something that seems impossible to explain. This isn't about likes. It's about leaving marks. You might be helping someone else understand they're not crazy. Or maybe you're signing your entry into the next chapter. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, come. Really, we don't create videos. We open doors. And whoever enters here never looks at the world the same way again. The subscription isn't just a button. It's an agreement between those who don't want to live on the surface. Share your story in the comments. What did you feel with this video? Did it remind you of something you lived through? Or maybe you've already been to Vlaška, but don't remember? We've reached the end of this journey through the unknown. If you made it this far, thank you for being on this trip with me, even through the shadows. I really want to know what this story awakened in you. Did you feel the weight of fear, doubt, or even the curiosity that makes us move forward? If you liked the video, if it brought something new to your view of the supernatural, subscribe to the channel. Here, we don't just share stories. We create a community where your experiences are part of what unites us. Tell us in the comments which part moved you most, or if you've lived through something similar. Your story could be the next account that will move all of us. Let's grow together in this network of mysteries and learning. Thank you for trusting me to tell these accounts. Until the next encounter, and remember, the world is full of things we can't explain, but together, we're stronger to face them.